Chili here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is Moon Hour. Moon is ruled by Mars. Mars is 18 degrees Sag, and the midheaven is ruled by Mars at 5 degrees Leo. The ascendant is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is direct in Pisces. So I want to talk about Chiron Aries in Aries and the wound around origin, because I believe I am the first astrologer that I saw. Now, surely there are other astrologers that talk about it, but they might have been equally isolated, so I don't see them. And the topic of the origin of cloning lineage is an actual thing that have been disincluded from the discourse, particularly around indigenous people, okay, or lands of origin. And Chiron Aries here in Andromeda constellation is, of course, inclusivity. So, if I talk about my supposed origin, I saw that in the eclipse where my mother or fatherland, particularly fatherland, would be denoted, what actually happened is me going not to my land of bloodline origin, but actually the land of the father that couldn't have me from his own biology. And that country came about when it came to my fatherland. Not only that, my surname has to do with blood. Okay? So there was an insistence on natural birth from love, and so on and so forth. Therefore, I'm not an IVF child. Okay, not that I have problem with IVF. Like, it's not. It was coming from my parents, not from me. Okay, but this is also a storyline that talks about the wound of origin in regards to blood and bloodline. Juxtaposed to that, the cloned lineages are arriving from a place where nothing was preserved because it was the womb that was stolen from babies, from children, from okay, we're talking about before the technology and even with the technology. And there was also the use of energy harvesting, and the only thing that was actually preserved is from the clone of the dead, okay, from the dead, the previous person's DNA, and has to do also with the blood, and those type of birthings, okay, were completely negating anything that is of origin in attempt to preserve the origin of the blood, which in practice we understand that was not happening. Not only that, the plasma-based medicine is basically, and I saw now there are also Chinese people talking about China having literally medicine derived from the blood of babies in order to maintain youth and so on. So we understand that while the issue of blood is very important, the plasma medicine is derived from basically homeless people that are given blood in inhumane conditions, usually with shit tons of added addictions on all kind of things that are juxtaposed to that state of homelessness, and that ends up in the blood of the monarchy. Okay, that ends up with the people that have the money to buy plasma-based medicine. Now, when we talk about the wound of origin, and we think about the people who have been growing in positions and situations where the blood matters so much, the bloodline matters so much, and there is an attempt to push to the edge of life in order to supposedly preserve longevity or to have the most surviving, and surviving, it means that those children survive horrors, and the survivors, the few survivors we have from these type of lineages, they were usually children that were thought to be expandable, and then had some remnants of the bloodline of the elite. Annika Lucas is a famous survivor of that, and she describes a world where um, the big details she gets into in her own book, and in her interview she describes a world where the people are pretending to be one of the people, but they don't actually see themselves as commoners, and that's to say that's an understatement. Um, but also, what does land of origin mean when the wealth was accumulated on having to, how should I say it, overcome other supposedly species or the entire human species? And this is where the juxtaposition of indigenous people or bloodline that also care deeply about blood and origin is juxtaposed to that which can both be the utmost mimicry of that, and I know I'm broadcasting from a region that is famous for just these discussions. Is it 7 millennia Palestinian or 9 millennia Palestinian or 10 millennia Jewish it's kind of where even over the last century, most people are not acquainted with the fact that a camel is absolutely not a desert animal. It is well adapted to the desert, but it's not starting that way. So this is the face of the land that we thought take hundreds of years, and actually less than a century. And so at this point, this wound of origin and the the stories of persecution of both origins that are cloned and origins that are of a certain native land, the mimicry of stories of origin versus the authentic, and the trouble with both when it comes to even bloodline segregation, resisting the monarchy. Okay, if we go to South Africa, the story of Nelson Mandela. He was of the bloodline of the monarchy but could not be a monarch himself. Then came apartheid. He abolished apartheid, married a woman from another tribe. And again, I don't know if that was, yes, if that was rape or not, I don't know. Okay, that nobody was talking about. There was no Me Too back then. And then, but he did change the tradition of bloodline segregation in his own lineage tribes, and kicked out apartheid and became a prime minister, where before apartheid he could not be a king, but after apartheid he was a prime minister. It was controversial both within and outside. Of course, spending 28 years in jail, Saturn cycle, an entire Saturn cycle in jail. And so, and that's because the people of his supposed origin were resisting the change in their origin traditions. So we talk about the story of origin, and what do we believe is natural? Do people believe that slavery is natural? Do people believe that trafficking is natural? The more I listen to people like Annika Lucas, the more I understand that the people that are going to the sex trafficking are the children that somehow were smuggled out of the child trafficking, but they were programmed to be drug addicts and prostitutes, men and women, or drug dealers and traffickers. Okay, so but those would compete with extortion codes. And so Chiron Aries are honing on this wound of origin. What is an origin? How come certain origins show regardless of the blood? Where certain bloodlines need to be, people fearing to connect with their families so not to be sacrificed. And those could be indigenous people, as well as elite families that always come to bloodlines. So what is the origin? The real and the not. The true bloodline and the not. And with Neptune, there is a holistic view about that which is missing. And it's going to be surprising to everyone. Okay, if I grow up with my mother, then there is an eclipse on my fatherland. I go to my fatherland and I reconnect with the parts in my mother that have to do with the culture that she got from being married 14 years to my father. That's not my father by blood, although the surname is to do with blood. But that was the thing that came up in a fated eclipse event to do with my origin. And then there are the cloned people that they were not even coming from an original birthing consenting mother, and even those that the rituals that were beyond horrific. So what is origin in that regard? And then having been acquainted with the energy of indigenous people that's coming from the line of my north node, I felt really loved to the bone. It was something that was missing, and not because I wasn't loved. In fact, there was an utmost emphasis about me being born from love, which is why I wasn't adopted or an IVF child, because the story of the birthing was important, and being juxtaposed to the birthing of the elite, I really understand why. Something as a child I didn't understand was the big deal. I was like, okay, then I was born this way. Like, what's the big deal? What's the big insistence um, on that particular type of natural birth? But this is where suddenly being acquainted with the energy of those indigenous traditions and something that is so loving, that is sacred, some completely new to me. Okay, because I have Jewish ancestors that, of course, were disassembled across everywhere, and then with the origin that came from Netherlands, it could have been mixed with Jews as well. Um, the North Netherlands, um, and and the blood origins that could have come from Northern Africa. That I don't know what would that be mixed with. In Israel, by the way, you cannot even have a DNA test, And even then they would hide the results, and those DNAs are sold. Like, this is information that's being sold, that's being traded. But of course, every baby that is born, they take their blood as well. Um, so this wound of origin receives unexpected, um, unusual things, unusual data that is showing up. And as a person that has Rahu Chiron in the fourth house, which is a house of origin, okay, then this is a topic where with Neptune in ingressing, but also with Chiron already in Aries, looking at our origin bloodline in a more holistic way, because Neptune into the sign of the blood is going to show up even as not the original blood cells, but there's something there that correlates with what is the same signified as the signified of blood. And the question is, what is the signifier? And what else is being signified? That could be astrology. Okay, if you think about Mars, or I know I speak in linguist terms because I guess that's my weird tradition. Okay. And by the way, when I studied linguistics, I studied at the faculty that honors Chomsky, so much so that I couldn't do a student exchange in Germany. I got accepted to the university, but they said to me that the courses are semiotics and stuff, and the things that are no longer studied in the faculty that was in Israel, in Ben Gurion, because they were honoring Chomsky. And one of my teachers was rebelling Chomsky. She was looking into the putting one word on top of another. And then I was looking at that, me and another student were looking at that each in our own distinct ways. And then, of course, they had to rebel her like she rebelled Chomsky. And this is a tradition of rebellion that came about. But it's interesting that semiotics comes into play when I discuss origin. And to me, of course, is language because of Gemini. Okay, is also associated with language technology. Um, something can be technological but more real than real, and something can be real but having undergone, I don't know, abuse or ritual, um, being the void of the real, or being a void. And this is and of course, every word is triggering another mystical trauma that might take decades to recover from. And I really, and all is fated, so I really don't know. And so, um, these types of topics, those intricacies, are definitely going to be the mark of the Saturn Neptune and the Neptune ingress as well. It's also the Chiron Aries there. Okay, the Chiron Aries is highly significant because Aries is the cloning project. And We were talking about the blood. The topics of genitals are definitely going to come about. Okay, but also in the traditions that we're doing mutilation of genitals. Okay, but all across the board. I talked about Aries eradicating that which is an impediment on sexual sovereignty. So think about genitalia mutilation, which is prevalent in so many cultures, usually indigenous, but also elite. And that is, again, something that was meant to harm the sovereignty. Okay, it's marketed as gender affirming care, and I'm not saying that there isn't gender affirming care that is successful and so on, but definitely this is a can of worms that will be addressed thoroughly in the coming Chiron Aries, okay, the coming years, and definitely with Neptune going into Aries, we can see even the Chiron Aries as only the tip of the iceberg of tending to the wound of origin that we're going to be seeing in the next decade and a half, the aftermath. And that tells us that the Saturn Neptune is the mark of that ingress that's going to take us 15 years forward. And with Saturn, of course, bigger cycles forward. There's only going to be one conjunction in Aries of Saturn and Neptune. Saturn takes 28 years to surround the zodiac. But the big deal, the big issues, the big problems, and even as in astrocartography, okay, where most of the people, and shout out to the lady that teaches astrocartography. There's this very famous lady, and she taught me about the parents. So I want to. She probably is going to show just with astrocartography. And that is Helena Woods. Okay? So that is Helena Woods.
Hey guys, it's
And
Helena
she
and welcome
has
back to my
great
channel.
channel. She also does
I'm going to
mundane
be talking all
astrology.
about
She's
astrocartography today.
practicing
This
traveling
is going to
herself.
be an
So those that
intro
can afford, let's say,
101
to travel to your
video
Venus line, your moon
about
line, that's the
astrocartography,
best
what
place
it
I know
is,
to get a
and how we can use
consultation
it to travel, move to
for
new
that
places that will
purpose.
best support.
And yet when I looked at my own Rahu line with the Rahu parent, I saw that the juncture is where I haven't been yet, which is, of course, it's Rahu, but Rahu is in my 4th house. And it's also with Chiron, so of course I cannot just travel there, and yet I'm meant to do something to do with that. And I began to talk about the fact that I have a watch where the watch part was taken out. The watch fell out of the watch, and it's a timeless clock right now. And a part of the Rahu locations that are highly signified for me, having to do with something weird with the time, or even transcending time. And as an astrologer, I found that particularly fascinating because it's the studies of the right time for something. And then where I'm heading is to a point of time transcendence, which is such a Neptunian quest. And I have Neptune in Saturn sign, which is time. Is everything okay, Mom? Oh, okay, okay. I got shit scared right now. No, we had a missing cat, and then my mom gets to the closet and takes out the clothes, and she had this face that I couldn't see exactly her face. So I was like, oh my God, like did she have to pick up a corpse or something? And that was the mood. But no, we're just traveling. So that's what 22 in the ninth house looks like. But this is also the point where Rahu is best coffee ever. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. This is also where um, even astrology and origin land and the whole concept of citizenship, if we are to consider sovereignty and the innate calling of people is to be addressed completely differently. And I'll probably have a series upon series as the astrologer that did the astrological considerations for declarations of independence series that was spread across 3 channels. Spirit of Matter on YouTube, Rockefeller Astrolabe on BitChute, and Jupiter Point of Talos on BitChute. And I don't know if I did an episode for the Sirius channel, Sirius Talos one series on BitChute. But that was right about time to do that. So yeah, those are all things to consider when we talk about the sovereignty. And by the way, I'm really honoring Krasi Atasio's work from the sidereal perspective that was really approving of my tropical findings, where the moon, which is the people, is located in usually misfortune, unfortunate places, when those that decide on the election of the Declaration of Independence, which is to be the chart of the country, are basically deciding that without the interest of the people, but particularly putting the moon in miserable situations where we know that the moon is the first thing, and this is thanks to Austin Koppak, who does also teachings of astrological magic. The first thing we look at an election, an astrological election, is the moon being in the best position possible. And that means that these people set themselves to fall from the get-go, because if they made that election, even if they are the leaders, the moon needs to be in a good position for something to sustain. And so, and one last word about my coffee. So I decided to try and ditch milk because I couldn't access like the good milk after I made investment on things that I really want. And I decided to ditch that and turn it into. So what I'm drinking right now is just black coffee. I know that this is a very controversial term, but I could call it Turkish coffee. But if I'm in Greece, I couldn't call it Turkish coffee. And it's actually a symbolic of a brand of called Elite in Israel, which is not for the elite. And I'm drinking that with a spoonful of coconut oil. I know that sounds bougie, but it's actually kind of like the most affordable oil. Granted that olive oil is no longer a thing because of the famine, and it's coconut oil. And here the real bougie thing is I put a drop of mint there, mint essential oil, which of course is going to bring the schools that gave a spoonful of essential oil prescription to a patient and then that patient died. I don't know how. They tell us that we need an entire can of eucalyptus to get the cyanide of it to commit suicide, but somebody managed to die from a spoonful of essential oils. And here we are. I mean, they were probably sick to begin with, but here we are with the fact that that internal consumption of 1 drop of essential oil mixed with a spoonful of carrier oil that is cold pressed and organic, then that's considered a controversial. It's a very controversial coffee, but it doesn't have milk, and it's tasty. It's so good. And yeah, I gotta leave now.